We need to honor what mothers are giving and their contribution to the world because it's enormous. But we also shouldn't be going to the point where we're celebrating losing too much of your pink or staying in these depleted places when having, really good nutrition and pregnancy and postpartum can really change that.
What's up, ladies? Welcome to the Health Class She Deserves, the show where we ditch outdated women's health myths and talk real bodies, real cycles, and real stories. I'm your host, Autumn Paone, and today we are joined by Suzzie Vehrs. She is a compassionate birth and postpartum doula dedicated to helping families navigate pregnancy, birth, and early parenthood with confidence and calm. Drawing on years of hands-on experience and a deep belief in informed, empowered choices, Suzzie guides parents through one of life's most transformative experiences with heart and evidence-based support. Through her work, she advocates for mindful, respectful birth experiences that honor both the emotional and physical journey of bringing new life into the world. Suzzie, welcome to class.
Hello, thank you for having me. I have learned so much on your podcast and therefore am extraordinarily honored to be here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm honored to have you here. We're going to be talking so much about, postpartum and nutrition and all of that today. And there's a lot of really interesting things that I know my audience hasn't heard from me at least before. So I'm very excited for this conversation. I'd love to begin with your background. So how did you end up as a doula?
Yeah, actually, it's a long story. So I worked in finance before I had my kids, and I had a friend that was a doula, and I thought she was hippie and weird and, like crazy. Um, I just wasn't in that mind where childbirth meant very much to me or doing natural things first. Like, why would you have to be proactive about anything? I was like, they'll take care of me. I had my first pregnancy was a very complicated loss at about 14 weeks. My second pregnancy, I had my amazing daughter Zoe, but it was a wild ride, an emergency C-section. And then I met a friend she was a student midwife, and we used to go hiking in this new moms group together. And I was like, whoa, like the things you talk about with birth and your clients are like nothing I have ever thought about, experienced. And I feel like I missed out on so much of this journey because I was so like putting it in everyone else's hands, so to speak. So when I had my second daughter, third pregnancy, um, I did everything different. I had a doula. I worked with a midwife. I was obsessed with nutrition. I felt great. I had an amazing birth. When you're doing a vaginal birth after a C-section, it's kind of like a little bit higher risk. And when I was talking to, I interviewed a whole bunch of different providers before I picked somebody. And one of the OBs like put all my information in a little calculator and was like, why would you try a VBAC? You only have a 30% chance of success. And then I delivered my amazing baby like the way I wanted to, and she was over 10 pounds. And I have just been like so proud of that ever since it happened, from the work I put in. It really changed what I wanted in life. And I just came out of that experience with like, I want to serve mothers. Specifically, I love helping people who are if people come to me and they're already like proactive about their health and like doing all the hippie natural things, I love that. But most of my clients actually aren't. Most of them are kind of like how I was as like a corporate girly, where your world is kind of like, you're focused on work and you're getting things done and you don't really have a holistic perspective yet. And it's such a joy to kind of help people see some of the truths about what it means to be human, and the way that our actions and choices and how much control we have over how we feel and what we get out of the experiences we're in.
That's empowering, right? It's like giving women back the power of like, oh, you actually have a choice here of how you feel. And I think that socially we think of birth as like a horrible, terrible, painful, like just traumatic experience, which it obviously can and has been for a lot of women, but it doesn't have to be. And there are these things that you can do to prepare. And that's such a flip from finance to midwifery.
It's
That's so like
it's completely different. And to be clear, I'm not a licensed midwife. I did my doula training first. I was going to become a midwife, and I fell in love with being a doula because you get to spend more time with people and do more of the. You're not tied up with clinical tasks like taking blood pressure and
okay.
doing things like that. So
Yeah,
they
what
work
is the
together.
main okay, is that
Yeah.
the okay, gotcha. I was like, I'm not even sure I know that the technical difference between the 2, so that's interesting. And then are all doulas because you are, birth and postpartum, are all
Mhm.
doulas like that with the postpartum support as well?
Not really. Some
Okay.
doulas just do postpartum care where they're coming in and helping you with lactation and taking
Mm,
care of your baby. And some doulas are just birth doulas where they help you with your birth prep and they're there through your birth. I like to do both because I feel like you develop such a close connection with people in the labor process that it makes you better able to help people postpartum. And you also know some things that might be missed. Like if you're with a woman who has like a hemorrhage in her birth, so she lost a lot of blood, and then you're with her in the postpartum and she's like got brain fog and, a little bit of like just like feeling really, really off. Well, it's not likely that anyone's going to mention to her, like, oh, hey, you lost a lot of blood. Like that means you're probably really low on iron. Let's fix that. Like that's not a built-in
mhm,
part of the maternity care system. And so it's
okay.
really nice to be able to like, as a doula, I'm not a medical professional, but usually what I do is when I notice those things, one, we can talk about like what might be happening and the foods and the things that I can do practically when I'm there to maybe help them with it. And two,
Mhm,
what they need to like, hey, you should set an appointment with your midwife or your doctor or your family care practitioner and ask them to do like a blood draw and see like if you need to be like taking any supplements or
right,
solving
right,
anything before it
gotcha.
just like gets ignored for the next 10 years and turns into a big disease later.
Mhm. Yeah. So, yeah, you just have more of that, like, full picture, that makes sense, kind of being with them for the whole story and not just part of it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, we are talking about postpartum depression today. I'm not a mother, but I do love, like, seeing online I've seen so much empowerment from women and just this kind of movement to of mothers talking about their postpartum experiences because we've kind of, like, glorified it. And a lot of women I know are like guilted and they feel like bad mothers if they don't feel like an instant connection to their baby or they suffer with postpartum depression and you're just going through so much at that time. So let's just start basic for listeners who might be unsure. Like what is postpartum depression? How's it classified?
Yeah, so postpartum depression is, some people call it like baby blues. You had your baby, you expected it to be the happiest time of your life. You get home, you are kind of like feeling gray or turned off. It's most, from what I see, most people are not just like, there are ups and downs. A lot of people do like randomly cry in postpartum. That is pretty normal. That doesn't necessarily mean you have depression. Depression is like if you're feeling almost like someone turned off your emotions, like a light switch, like you're feeling detached, you're not able to connect, you're feeling like brain fog, you can't think clearly, you almost can't feel clearly. A lot of times people can't sleep, even though they're really tired, like the baby's keeping you awake a lot. But even when you have the opportunity to sleep, you can't actually fall asleep. And sometimes people have PTSD from birth too. An extension of that would be like having like a constant sense of like something bad about to happen to you or
Mm,
your baby, or that like hyper vigilant, hyper stressed out state. Those two things, I think, kind of they're very similar.
right.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And what's the so when it comes to like the birth trauma versus postpartum depression, like do they overlap or are they similar but different?
Yeah, I would say they definitely overlap a lot. And a lot of times what happens is someone will have a lot of postpartum trauma. Like if you had a very difficult birth, and I hate saying this, but it's about a third of mothers come through labor with diagnosable PTSD, which is terrible. It means we're like doing something wrong in the way we're supporting people because yes, labor can be challenging, but you should not like that is not okay. That has more to do with how you're being prepped and how you're being
Hmm.
taken care of through the process than it does with like labor itself. But one thing that I sometimes see is that somebody, to me, like I have been at their birth, I know that they had a very traumatic experience, but then they're just feeling off after, and it's getting labeled as, oh, you're just depressed, or oh, you're just going through hormonal shifts. And then what happens is maybe you get put on an antidepressant, or maybe you get people are trying to give you space and give you grace, but they're not actually giving you tools to actually address the fact that you went through something traumatic and now you have this trauma kind of like written in your body. And how do you unpack that? Right? Like for me, that would be like a recommendation. I have like a list of therapists in the area that are very good at addressing PTSD. But I think that, mislabeling birth trauma as like, oh, I feel off, the symptoms are almost exactly the same. So unless you have somebody that's really curious about your story, it
Hmm.
can so easily get just ignored or written off
Hmm.
as like, oh, it's a normal part of postpartum to feel off, which makes me very sad.
That's a crazy stat that 30% you said of
Yeah.
new mothers are, yeah, that's like, that's enormous. That's an enormous number. And you're totally right. And like with all like your environment and the support that you're getting around you as well, which I definitely want to come back to a little bit later in the interview. But for now, let's move on to a little bit more about the way that postpartum depression is kind of being addressed. And you started to touch on it a little bit, but how does the language, I guess, around like this is just postpartum, this is just normal, delay care for mothers, and what else could also be going on? Like what's the lack of investigation there, I guess?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think our maternity systems are not really set up to give mothers very good care after postpartum. Like you have all these appointments to check in before birth, but those also are just looking to make sure that your blood pressure is right and that your vitals, right? Your blood pressure, do you have any signs that an emergency is physically happening in your body? That is what those appointments are for. They're not really for like understanding your new nutritional needs.
Hmm.
They're 15 minutes long, if that,
Hmm.
right? And then you have your baby. And then after birth, most people, some of the newer practices will do like a 2-week checkup, but most practices now are doing a 6-week checkup where what they're asking is most of them will do a screen for postpartum depression, in which case they would refer you to a therapist, which is great. I think that is incredibly important, but they're not running labs. They're not checking to see if you have any, significant deficiencies. Both vitamin D and low iron um, are very common in pregnancy, and both of those, if you're low in either of those, they kind of present the same as postpartum depression with the brain fog and the no energy and the getting sick very easily. And so that's a problem. And then the third thing they're doing in the uh, check is in that like 6-week check is they're just making sure you get back on birth control or you understand that you have options there. So it's really not about like, hey, are you really doing well? Or we know that you just gave a tremendous amount in pregnancy. Like you have spent 9 months literally from your body giving to grow a new body. And if you're breastfeeding, you're continuing to do that. And so all these nutritional demands, energy demands, are ginormous, right? Like what you are giving. So you do need to rebuild. You give, so you rebuild. Our systems are not really set up to walk you through that. It's kind of just left on your own plate. And one thing that I have seen a lot of conversation with the moms that I work with is there's this new understanding that when you reach postpartum, you are depleted and that's okay. And on one hand, that's good that you're recognizing that we are, as a society, starting to recognize like this period of depletion. There's this analogy that's really popular with flamingos because when flamingos give birth, they like lose all their pink color because they're giving so much to their babies. And it takes them 2 years to kind of get back. And I see a lot of people talking about losing your pink or getting your pink back and recognizing like, hey, after you give birth, there is a process of recovery. I think that is fantastic, and we should continue talking about that. The thing that I don't see with that, though, is that it's very often portrayed as like this passive thing that, like, oh, if you wait for 2 years, your energy is going to come back. Your interest in life is going to come back. Your time for hobbies is going to come back. That, like, it's just a time thing and, magically it comes back to you. The thing that I worry about is that part of losing that pink, part of losing, yes, you are giving a tremendous amount to your baby, but if you're like most women, 80% of women are coming through pregnancy with significant nutritional deficiencies. Birth trauma leads to problems with the thyroid. Like, these things are not going to just resolve themselves with time. And so I think it's really important to talk about with mothers, like, yes, you are giving a lot. It is good to acknowledge that and good to celebrate that and good to like, we need to honor what mothers are giving and their contribution to the world because it's enormous and that, you should be recognized for that. But we also shouldn't be like going to the point where we're like celebrating losing too much of your pink or staying in these depleted places when having, really good nutrition and pregnancy and postpartum can really change that. And what if you don't really have to lose so much of your pink, right?
Mhm. Mhm. I love that, and I think that's such a great way to say it because, like, yeah, in one sense, it is normal when you think about just the process of birth and how taxing that is on a woman's body. Obviously, you're gonna have some depletions coming out of it, but to normalize it to the point where you're like, nothing you can do about it. Let's just live with it. It's like, well, that's not true either. There are things we can do. So something that I see, and hopefully it's changing. I feel like this is a little bit more with the older generations, but um the kind of obsession with like low fat and going into like a cardio craze and getting your pre-baby body back and all of that. Can you talk a little bit about how like those fads and that obsession with skinny is actually really hurting new mothers on this front of helping to get their pink back?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, your body is not going to bounce back in 6 weeks. And that is like that expectation that you have a baby and hit the ground running like you didn't have a baby is completely insane because you are giving so much. I think when you look at diet and the idea of like trying to be skinny, um, you're supposed to gain weight when you're pregnant, right? Like, that is biologically normal. One thing that can happen, like, nutrition can play into like more difficult birth stories too, because if you're going through your pregnancy and you're continually under eating, you are actually also setting yourself up for really big complications. For example, they've done studies where they have tracked women's protein intake, um, and vegetables. Those are the two main where I would say, like, we really need to be, like, looking at how much protein and vegetables you're having, and, like, I'm definitely not, like, a cut the carbs or cut the fat type person, um, but specifically, like, the protein and the vegetables, the whole food protein, not the, I just made a protein shake. The There are studies where they've worked with populations of women, and when you fix those 2 problems, the, preterm birth rate will go down 80%. The amount of preeclampsia, which is like a life endangering situation and causes, the need for inductions and the need for interventions in labor, practically disappears. Um, Whole foods, especially fat, is like so important because that's where you're getting your like vitamin A, your vitamin K that will help with clotting. Um, Not many foods have vitamin D, but the ones that do are almost like fat, like
Hmm.
your butter, your milk, your salmon. Um, and that's one of those vitamins that is like very much contributing to the postpartum. The mistaking postpartum depression for postpartum depletion, I think that it is um, 40% of women have below optimal levels of vitamin D and 20% have severe deficiencies. So that's 1 in 5 that are having vitamin D deficiencies that are like
Yeah.
so low, it's affecting everything in their health.
Hmm.
So it's really important that, when you're looking at your food, if you're picking, like, it's okay to drink whole milk in pregnancy. In fact, you should. And you can have the yogurt with the full fat.
Hmm.
Like the whole idea that we need to be cutting things out so that we can remain small. It's not so good.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then we extend that fear to our babies because so many people are scared of having like a baby that's big
Hmm.
and like having a baby that's like gigantic. Like if you have uncontrolled diabetes or something like that, that can be a true medical problem. But I stand here before you as a woman who gave birth to a 10-pound baby. And, I have attended many births of 10-pound babies. It's okay for a baby to get a little bit
Hmm.
chunky.
Yeah.
Like, those rules are so
Yeah.
cute, and they
Chunky
sleep
babies are
so
cuter. Yeah.
well, and they eat so well. They're so easy to take care of when they're here.
That's so funny. Yeah. My friend just gave birth to a pretty chunky baby. I think she's like just under 9 pounds.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and she's adorable. But she was so chunky coming out, all the
Yeah.
rolls. She has so
Oh
much
my
hair
god.
too. I keep joking. She also could like practically lift her head on like day 4. Like I kept joking that
Mhm.
she was born a month old. I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, that's such a
Yeah.
good point, and then even, like, to you said I like how you said, like, extend that fear to the baby because 'cause you're scared of giving birth to a larger baby, but then even if we go further into, like, raising a child, especially if that child is a girl and you're
Mhm.
obsessed with being small, and then you're passing that on as well, that
Yeah.
mentality of just shrinking women as much as possible, and it's not healthy.
Yeah. My older daughter is 11 now, and she has been a gymnast most of her life. And, like there are times where I'm like, oh, I have to be like paying really close attention because I'm like, you need to eat enough calories. And it's really hard. Like they will ask me about how many calories are in things. And I'm like, okay, my older daughter is 11, my youngest is 7. And I'm like, why are you thinking about these things at your age? Like, how did this even get put in front of you but it's true. Like it is seeping into our girls at a very, very young age.
Mhm. Yeah, it's so true, and yeah, I think the home needs to be one of those, like, safe places
Hmm.
to really fight back against that. Um, so you talked a lot about I loved your, when you said, like, confusing postpartum depression with postpartum deficiencies. Is
Yeah.
there when you said that, I was curious, is there, like, a clear line between the 2, or is it really, like, blurred and how do you determine that?
Yeah. Well, it is incredibly blurred because if you go to a therapist, they're not going to know to look at, like, they can't draw labs. They don't know anything about that. So they can, like, I think most women should go see a therapist, but you should also go see like a naturopath or a functional doctor or somebody who can draw labs and kind of look at it from both sides because there is an emotional side to birth that's very important to address, especially if you experience trauma and you're going through like the biggest life change you have experienced, right? Especially if it's a first child. And there's so many dynamics that are going to come into play between like how the work of this child is split between a couple. Like that, most people need a therapist to help them work through some of that, or we'll work through it a lot quicker with a therapist,
Right.
right? Like, so good. But depletion, on the other hand, um, that's completely different. There is a very good book that I recommend. I just give to a lot of my clients. It's called The Postnatal Depletion Cure. And it will walk people through like what are the symptoms. They're essentially the same as postpartum depression. But it will talk you through like what labs you can ask to have drawn if you're because a lot of women are kind of on their own on this, right? Like if you don't have somebody in your area who is specifically passionate about this topic, it is not a part of the standard of care to be looking at, are you, is your body depleted? And
Mhm.
that
That's
can,
crazy.
yeah, it is crazy because if you like, your body will take bone density out of your body to give to your baby. Like, if you want to prevent osteoporosis when you're, 60, 70, 80 years old, it really matters how you're being taken care of when you are giving birth and recovering from giving birth because what you give to your baby can be restored, but it's not going to happen unless you take action to do so.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I feel like with a lot of these interviews I've done talking about a lot of different things, it often comes back to functional lab testing. And so it's
Yeah.
wild to me that like you almost never can get these covered by insurance. And
Hmm.
yeah, and like obviously like like you alluded to in the beginning as well, conventional medicine is meant to save lives and detect disease. And like you said, like at those 15-minute appointments during pregnancy, it's not necessarily meant to check if you're doing optimally. It's just to check to make sure that your life isn't in danger or the baby's life isn't in danger. And so
Right. Are
these
you
more
already experiencing a medical complication?
Yes, and these more holistic approaches that obviously that's super important and we need that, but to also add in something with like the functional lab testing and checking for these nutrient levels, like it just seems so basic to me. And it's very interesting that we don't just automatically do that, especially when we have these numbers of what was it 20% of women having vitamin D deficiencies
Mhm.
you know, when we know these things and we know how strong the link is between nutrients and mental health and gut health and
Yeah.
all of this, how
Yeah.
interconnected it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that if we have, like in my childbirth course, we talk about nutrition, and I feel like if you learn about nutrition early in your pregnancy, and you are, making sure you're getting enough vegetables and you're making sure you're getting enough protein, you typically like what I see with the moms I work with is that they feel great in pregnancy. They have energy. They are not facing a lot of like you're not having a lot of complications in your pregnancy because you're giving your body what it needs. So I think that like functional testing is still reactive, right? Because it is not that hard. Like the way we teach it in our childbirth course is you just have to like count these two things. One, we're counting whole food protein. We're trying to get up to 80 grams in the first half of pregnancy and 80 to 100 in the second half. Very basic. Fruit, vegetables for like 5 a day to stay alive, 7's better, but 9 is divine, right? Pretty basic. If you can hit those 2 things, I have never seen a mom with postpartum depression.
Wow.
Maybe if she goes through
Yeah.
trauma, yes,
Right.
but like your C-section recovery, your recovery after birth, like you're gonna
Mhm.
pop right back up. So then why go draw labs? Because you're
Mhm.
fine, right?
Right.
So I think there is like functional testing needs to be more a part of our system. But like honestly, it's not that hard to stay healthy. Like if people knew how important it was and then had support, because it's really easy to say get 100 grams of protein a day, but go try to do it. It's a little bit harder,
Yeah, yeah.
It's much harder to do, especially when
Yes.
you're juggling work and maybe other kids and how your
Right.
spouse eats. Like we need a lot of help on the front end. And then like hopefully you just don't even run into the problem in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. To really I just wrote like for my Substack, I just wrote a piece about like how we overcomplicate health and how it's really not that difficult when you're doing these basic things. And then obviously if you do those basic things and you end up having problems still, I guess that is probably when the labs would be more useful. But like you
Yeah,
said, a lot of more often than not you do these things and the problems go away. And that's
right.
like it's yeah, the education around it I guess is just not all there when it comes to supporting pregnancy and supporting new mothers. And that kind of brings me to where I want to move now about the role of like partners and family members and loved ones and the role that they play when it comes to either supporting or perhaps unintentionally worsening postpartum health.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's very different culturally because, where I'm in Seattle, we're a very multicultural city where a lot of people are from, all around the world. And so I would say when I work with families that are not from America or their parents are not from America, then when they have a baby, there's this like a mother, mother-in-law, someone in the family is coming to stay with them and they're following very culturally specific diets that have specific foods to support both pregnancy and postpartum. And there's someone else 100% prepping the food, cleaning up the mess. Like it is the community's job to feed and nourish a mother, which is such a beautiful thing. In the more like American families that I work with that, have our like the food that's brought to families is usually like very carb heavy or just, maybe just not, standard American. There's instead of like prepping healthy food, it's like we'll give you a DoorDash gift card, which is so lovely. Like if that's what you can do, do it. But if you can actually make like a really healthy meal for a mom, like that is such a gift because, um, like you can't, if you're one of the like shocking realities of taking care of a newborn is it takes about 40 hours to just feed a newborn, 40 hours a week to feed a newborn. So it's like a full-time job. And so like
Yeah.
really if a mom is exclusively breastfeeding, it should fall to other people to take care of her the same way that um we would recognize somebody who's going to like a corporate job and coming back and recognizing like they're not going to have the same time, effort, and energy to create like an elaborate meal. So if you can gift a meal that is like 50% vegetables, 50% protein, salmon and a salad is gorgeous. Will do so much for a mother's postpartum health and just checking in, you know, snacks that she can pick up
Mm.
easily. I have a recipe on my website for lactation balls, which have it's a lot of protein, it's a lot of fiber, got chia seeds for iron and brewer's yeast to help support milk supply, and they taste really good. You
Mm.
like make those and put them in a couple plastic things so she can just have them. So anytime she's like feeding the baby and she's like sits down and she's like, "Oh my God, I just realized I'm so hungry and thirsty." Like, "Oh my God, there's a snack and a drink right there, a coconut water
Yeah.
right there." Like just preparing those little like snack stations, taking care of the healthy food, and then just checking in and cheering her on and helping her know that like yes, you are still human and we still appreciate you. And it's not all about the baby, even though we're excited for the baby.
Mm.
Goes a really long ways.
Yeah. I can imagine. That's such a good point. Especially for someone like I said, I'm not a mother, but I am such a snacker, and I can imagine that if I was, breastfeeding and 40 hours a week, I love that I know that now. Because we do see such like a lack of respect, I guess, for the work that it takes to be
Yeah.
a mom in general, let alone a new mom. Um, but yeah, just having something right next to you that you can just easily pop in your mouth and is nourishing you. I like how you said 50% vegetables, 50% protein. Because I think a lot of times when people think of just a healthy meal, they're thinking of like a green smoothie or just like a salad or something. And those things are great, but a lot of times they don't have that protein component. And from what I understand, at least when it comes to postpartum nutrition, much denser meals and from like a Chinese medicine perspective, like just very warm, nourishing foods is
Hmm.
typically the way to go. Is that
Yeah,
true?
like soups, stews.
Mm.
Um, yeah, especially, it's really interesting because the idea of like keeping heat in the body, it's in many of the traditional cultures. Like you also
Mhm.
see it in Ayurvedic medicine, and the Japanese culture has a similar belief about heat. And you'll see in all of those cultures that there is a focus on like broth, on meat, um, mushrooms, like
Mm.
food mushrooms, not like
Mhm.
medicinal like
Right.
mushrooms. Which is interesting because like mushrooms are one of the few vegetables that can have vitamin D, especially if you put them in the sun, they'll like absorb the vitamin D and then you get it when you eat it, which is really strange. It shows up in all
Right.
these like historical traditions, which I think is really
Yeah.
cool. Um, yeah. And then like one other thing to kind of like it's very normal for women to crave a lot of carbs, both in the first trimester of pregnancy and in postpartum. And a lot of that is because your nutritional demands are so high that if you're not getting what you need, you kind of like default to that. So if you're having
Mhm.
really strong carb cravings, I'm not saying you can't go eat like the piece of bread you want, sure, do that. But also know that that probably means you need a lot, you're under eating in general.
That's a good point. I love the whole, like, learning to decode your cravings as well, because I think when I was younger, I would, get crazy cravings in my luteal phase, and I would just, like, kinda go with them, and then once I started learning a lot more about, like, hormone health and all of that and dove into it, I was like, "Okay, when I crave when I'm really craving French fries or whatever,
Hmm.
maybe I don't have enough salt, or maybe I need more, like, healthy fats, instead of just,
Hmm.
like, fried food or something." So kind of the same idea of decoding your cravings of, "Ooh, I'm craving a lot of carbs. Maybe I just need a higher caloric intake in general and need to focus more on protein as well."
Yeah.
So I really
And
like that
healthy fats.
approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, listening to your
Yeah.
body and really determining what it means. I highly doubt, not that I've experienced it, but I just feel like I doubt that I would be craving, like, a salad during post-pregnancy. I think all the things I would
I
be
know.
craving would be, like, soup and, like, the things that we've been talking about.
Well, and
Um
I think a funny thing about salad that like, you don't really think about how much time it takes to eat things until you're trying to do it with a baby in your hand. But salad's actually like it takes a long time to eat salad. Like, you have to,
Yeah.
like, chew it a long time,
Mm.
and when you're thinking about, like, life with a newborn, you don't have time like,
Mhm.
all the basics have kind of flown out the window. Like, you're down to, like, eating a couple bites. You're down like, you may or may not get time for a shower. You are sleep deprived. So like, if you can eat something quickly,
Mhm.
also, like, a huge pro, which I think is another benefit of the soups is they're typically, like, easier. They're just
Mhm.
easier to eat as well
Yeah,
as, like, more nutritionally dense. But
definitely, for sure. Yeah, it's those little things that you never really think of until
yeah.
you're going through it. And also just for, like, loved ones and partners to be aware of all of those things as well, I think makes a world of difference for people.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit more about, like, actionable steps people can take. We've obviously covered quite a bit, but is there anything else that we haven't covered that women can do to prepare, for postpartum, you know, pre-birth and even pre-pregnancy, potentially? Things that can be done to prepare.
Oh, yeah. You know, uh, creating a baby is going to be the most demanding thing you probably do in your life. I know for me, there's nothing I've ever done in my life that took so much of me. And the first time I went through it, I did it without, the expectation was that, it was more important for me to make it look easy than it was to actually, I kind of saw like taking extra sleep, taking extra care, was almost like made me look weak, which is the opposite.
Mhm.
Um, and then the second time around, I think because I had kind of such a different point of view, it was so much easier to be like, no, wait, I do have to slow down. It means I am going to work less. It means I am going to be um, more conscious of the little choices I'm making. I truly believe that most of our health and wellness comes down to like the basics, the sleep, movement, food, getting sunlight. And then, yes, monitor and treat on top of that, but we can't let monitor and treat be our entire plan,
Mhm.
right? Like it's an
Mhm.
important layer of how we become healthy, but it's not the foundation of that health
Right.
pyramid.
Right. I love that explanation. I also think it's so relatable what you say about feeling weak, and, like, needing those things, and for me personally, like, asking for help, never been my forte. I've always
It's hard.
hated
Yeah.
having to ask for help. Yeah, so I can imagine in those situations, that mental battle, if you haven't done that mental work yet of, like, learning to ask for help and learning to take up space, bringing it back to that
Yeah.
conversation, I can see how that would end up being, something that just gets like, compounds during
Mhm.
pregnancy and postpartum, so what resources I know you mentioned your, like, little lactation, recipe that you have, but what are some other resources either from you or from other places that you'd recommend for women listening who are, like, either going through this or want to go through it eventually?
Yeah, yeah, if you're thinking about putting together, like, "Hey, I wanna check on my health for my before my pregnancy," like, as a doula, like, we're there to be very practical and help you kind of implement anything. Like, we're there for the physical and emotional side, so when it comes to birth prep, we're helping you think through how your choices and, like, creating that birth plan, understanding the impact of your choices. We're there by your side as you're doing it, like, helping you do it. And same in postpartum, it's, like, very, like, like, "These are the meals you need, so we'll cook the meals for you," We're taking things off your plate and kind of making it so you can actually implement the things that you need to do. The other step, though, is finding out what do you need to do that might be different from somebody else, right? And that's where I would say, like, get some concurrent care if you're feeling depleted and if you're just feeling out of energy and do you feel like you're doing like the basics, go hire a clinical nutritionist, right? There's a program called FAY that's covered mostly through like most insurance will cover it, where you can have a nutrition actually, they're dietitians, I think. You can have a dietitian that you work with weekly who will help you figure out what do you need. They can draw labs, they can look at, what's going on in your body, and then someone like me can help you actually figure out, like, like, "Okay, I'm going to need all these soups and stews postpartum, like, how can I actually get those in my freezer so they're ready to go?" Or, like, now that I'm in postpartum and I know I'm trying to eat healthy, like, this is what I need. How do I do it? That's where a doula would kind of hold your hand and share that workload with you.
That's amazing, yeah, and that I can imagine that's such, like, rewarding work. Like, such a fulfilling job, I would
Oh my
imagine.
god. It is
Yeah.
the best. It is absolutely the best. I
Yeah,
really love it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, well, we are coming to the end here. I have a couple more questions,
Okay.
perhaps a little more thought-based, I guess. So, first one, if a new mother's listening right now and she feels like she's failing, what do you want her to hear?
There is no failing in motherhood. The fact that you feel that way means that you care tremendously. What you need probably is more support. So talk to your partner, talk to your mother, talk to your friends, and then look for the professionals around you that can help, that might be able to guide you, who have kind of been through it, not just once or twice, but many, many times.
Mhm. That's amazing advice, yeah, absolutely. And then the last question, this is a question I like to ask all of my guests, at the end of our interviews. So, if you could rewrite the health class curriculum that every woman deserves, what would your first lesson be?
Ooh, I would want it to be on how incredible our bodies are. Like about our periods, about our cycles, about how, um, like how incredible that biology is, because like the fact that we are able to create life is freaking amazing, and we don't talk about it enough or value it or respect it nearly as much as we should.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely agree. Women's bodies are just so cool, and I feel like we are kind of trained to look at a lot of aspects of female bodies as like burdens instead of power when like they're truly
Mhm.
powerful. And the only thing stopping them from being powerful is you believing that it's powerful because our bodies are
Exactly.
so cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been amazing, Susie. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you?
I am on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. It's at She Births Bravely. So if you need to find me, look there. Shebirthsbravely.com as well.
Great. I will make sure that is linked for everybody in the show notes. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure you Share with a friend, perhaps you know a new mother who maybe needs to hear some of this. And class dismissed.